Prison exists to house all the bad, broken, and irredeemable people in the world. Well, that's what we're led to believe. We see it in the movies. We see it on TV. We read about it in the media. But maybe that's not true. Some of the most creative, inspiring, and kind people I've ever met, I met in prison. For the past 5 years, I've been working in correction facilities in the UK and the US. And no, I'm not a prison guard. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a teacher, working with men and women and young people in the Oregon prisons, one by one, group by group. And I believe this idea could dramatically reduce the revolving door of recidivism. Recidivism means the tendency to reoffend. And this is important because right now, there's 2.3 million people in the prison system in America. And that's too fucking many. That's more than all the incarcerated people in England, Germany, France, Canada, Australia, and Afghanistan combined. That's a lot of people. And it's disproportionately stunting the social and economic well-being of poor communities and communities of color. It's been doing it for generations. The idea is simple, and it's this. We're not broken. And our experience of life is coming from within us, not outside of us, 100% of the time. And when we realize that, it's transformative. What do I mean within us or outside of us? Well, let's take this room for an example. We're all in the same room, but we're all having vastly different experiences. I'm sitting up here, or standing up here, having my own unique experience. Some of you are really intrigued with what I'm going to be talking about. Some of you may be preoccupied with work or what the kids are getting up to at home. Some of you may be thinking, isn't it lunchtime? Get on with it, woman. 3,000 minds, 3,000 variations. Experience doesn't happen out here. Experience happens in here. We're feeling our thinking. We're not feeling the world around us. And growing up, I would have loved to have known that. From a young age, I created a prison in my own mind. It was like an internal heckler had taken up residence in my brain, always telling me I didn't measure up. I wasn't clever enough, I wasn't thin enough, I wasn't popular enough, I wasn't pretty enough. It was relentless. I'm just really glad we didn't have social media back then. But at the age of 14, I developed an eating disorder, and I was bulimic for 20 years. I found ways to fix myself. I tried to find ways to fix myself with drugs and alcohol and all sorts of different therapies and way too many books. And there was one thing that finally landed. I'm not broken. There is nothing wrong with me. I didn't have an addiction problem. I had a thinking problem. I didn't have an addiction problem. I had a thinking problem. Like many people I work with, I lived in the innocent misunderstanding about how the mind works. I thought life was happening to me, but actually it's moving through me. like a paintbrush on canvas, thought is brought to life with our incredible internal special effects team, projects it into the world, giving us our 3D experience of life, and it feels so real. I'll give you an example. I was in England and I was babysitting my niece, and she was crying. So I went up to her room and she said, there's a monster in my room, there's a monster in my room. And she pointed to the wall, and there was a perfect silhouette of a monster on the wall. And I could see also that there were a row of teddy bears on her windowsill and a full moon shining through the window. So, being a good aunt, I'm not going to say, shh, the monster's real. I'm going to give you a bunch of tools and techniques to quieten the monster. That's just not helpful. I'm going to explain how it works. I'm going to say, look, if we take the teddy bear away from the window, look, the monster disappears. The moon is projecting light onto the wall and the monster appears, but we turn the light on and it vanishes. And she started to get it. And we were playing bunny ears and, doing things, and then she was okay. I could put the teddy bear back on the windowsill and the monster appeared back on the wall, but she could go to sleep because she understood how it worked. And the mind works the same way. The moon is like our internal special effects team, projecting thought onto the world, and it feels real. But it's just what we think. And this is what I teach. Every day of the week, I go to prison, I get buzzed in, I go through security, and I go find my room. And there's like 15 to 20 people usually waiting for me. And then we work together for 10 weeks, for 2 hours a week. And I'm pointing them back to themselves, to their own innate well-being. I'm not giving them a new formula. This isn't meditation, it's not mindfulness. There's no practice involved. It's like an unlearning, a shedding layers of habits of thought and labels we've collected over time. Addict, criminal, fuck up. But what they see is they're not their past. It's what they did, but it's not who they are. They're not broken. And well-being is their default setting. Well-being is all of our default settings. One participant had an insight on about week 7. And he said, I see my mind like my house. And my house used to just be filthy. It was full of garbage, it was noisy, it was rowdy, it was chaotic. And now, it looks different. It's peaceful, it's quiet, there's way more space. And he said, I'm sitting there admiring my clean house, and then a chicken walks in. And we were like, what? A chicken? And he said, yeah, a chicken. Have you ever tried to catch a chicken? It doesn't go well. There's dust and feathers flying all over, and it's chaotic, and I lose my peaceful house. But if you just let a chicken wander around, do his thing, pecking on the floor, it will find its own way out, quite happily. And he said, thoughts are like chickens. If I don't chase them all over, they quite happily find their own way out all by themselves. So when we don't chase chickens in our minds, or we get out of our own way, life goes better. And I see it. And I give Brandon as an example. Brandon grew up in a family of drug addicts and gang members. He joined a gang at 14. He had a kid at 16. He dropped out of school and was shot, not killed, shot on the streets at 17. His best friend died in his arms. He was an addict. He overdosed a couple of times. And at 19 years old, he went to prison for 15 years for gang-related violence. He was diagnosed with PTSD. He was on medication for anxiety and depression. And in just 10 weeks in our program, he realized for himself that he has everything he needs inside himself to lead a good life. He realized that feelings aren't germs. You can't catch them from anyone. So his anger became less something to react to, and more like rumble strips on the side of a highway would wake him up when his thinking had gone off-piste. Brandon's off his meds. He no longer suffers PTSD. He's been out 2 years now. He's doing amazing. He's got a great career and relationship. And when he was in prison, he said, "If I knew this 15 years ago, I wouldn't be here. We need to work with youth." So Brandon's doing our teacher training right now, so we can do just that. We can work in the youth system. This is only one story of countless others. For the past 3 years, I've worked with over 300 adults in custody in Oregon, and I've seen their worlds change. Men and women living out in the communities, living robust and healthy lives, getting custody of their children back, no longer in the foster care system. People out of addiction and off their medication, way less strain on the healthcare system. People getting good jobs and careers, out of the cycle of poverty. People no longer committing crimes and getting into trouble, out of the cycle of violence. This isn't just about ending recidivism. The ripple effect goes so much further. And it's not just prevention or intervention. It's innovation. Because when we stop chasing chickens in our mind, we have more space inside to have new ideas and fresh thoughts about what life can look like. What I hear from my participants is, when they feel at peace inside, it doesn't occur to them to hurt themselves or hurt others. Violence no longer makes sense. Addiction becomes a thing of the past. Bullying and racism start to dissolve. It's easier than we think, because love, understanding, and connection naturally re-emerge. Well-being is our default setting. Every day, I see the resilience of the human spirit. Every one of us has the capacity to get through a crisis or some awful situations. But the damage comes after, when we keep replaying the trauma over and over and over again, creating a prison in our own minds. But there's an easier way. I know it kind of seems too simple, right? I'm not giving them anything to do. I'm just pointing them to how the mind works. And they see it for themselves. And when they do, it's transformative. So when we understand the mind, we recognize the crazy internal special effects team that can create agony or ecstasy in the blink of an eye. And some days, we know that we've got chickens running amok and it's crazy in there. And other days, we get moments of peace where there's no chickens to be found. But that's just the nature of the mind. It's how we're designed to operate. But underneath all of that, we're okay. Our well-being is intact. And our okayness goes way deeper than the ups and downs of our everyday life. And the limitless potential of the unknown is living inside of us all the time. One of our female participants said, "Who would have thought I'd come to prison to find my freedom?" And it turns out freedom of mind is available to every single one of us. And remember, we're not broken. And we're living life, always, we're experiencing life from the inside out, not the outside in. Thank you.